major news stories dominating headlines this Thursday. Obviously, the Supreme Court rulings and also the Democratic debates last night and tonight. But there are some other major storylines that demand our attention, including the fallout from this haunting photo, a migrant father and his daughter who drowned while trying to cross the Rio Grande. And also, we get the president's response that, by almost every account, could be characterized as heartless. For that and her take on some other major issues, we return once again to my conversation earlier with former California Senator Barbara Boxer. Senator, I know you've seen the photograph along the Rio Grande, the father clutching in the final moments of his and his daughter's life, that image. And I saw people you served with in the Senate getting choked up on the floor. And while there wasn't any definitive plan for what to do, they said we have to do something. And then we heard the president.
If we had the right laws that the Democrats are not letting us have, those people, they wouldn't be coming up. They want to have open borders, and open borders mean crime, and open borders mean people drowning in the rivers.
It takes a lot to shock anymore, but the tone deafness, the indifference, and the lies about the passing of the buck, I don't know. I know. I wonder from your end, we are hit with a fire hose of news every day, but to me, that was jaw-dropping as you left for the G20. What's your reaction to not just the tragedy, but where we are as it relates to immigration reform or even getting funding for an aid package that the Senate will pass, let alone the president will permit to get desperately needed to these detention centers, et cetera?
There's so much I could say. I'll try to be concise. That picture is embedded in my mind, and I believe it's embedded in the minds of the American people. What you see there is a desperate child with total faith and trust in her dad, holding on to him for her last breath, and they go down together. Why? Why? Because of Trump's policies. This metering, which doesn't allow people to have their cases heard. Listen, this is a dark moment in our history. And when I think about other photographs, they stick in my mind the Charlottesville white supremacist, march with people holding torches and saying Jews will not replace us, and saying anti-African American slogans and anti-immigrant slogans. And frankly, this last picture of a woman, very respected writer, who is on a cover of a magazine in a dress that she said Donald Trump kind of ripped off her in an assault. These are images that are shocking to the soul. But getting back to this father-daughter who've become a symbol of the failure of this administration, it does not take rocket science to know what we should do immediately. Of course, get the funding to stop this humanitarian crisis and get health care to these kids and make sure that these families are treated like human beings. That's number one. But beyond that, there should be a surge of judges and lawyers to the border to hear these asylum claims. This is essential. And of course, the Congress has to go back and do comprehensive immigration reform, which I was proud to vote for. I think 67 of us did. Paul Ryan killed it in the House years ago, which would take stock of the whole circumstance. Look, we are in a hemisphere that's in turmoil now. We have people who are escaping from countries because they fear for their lives, and fear that their children will be maimed or pushed into sex trafficking. We need to sit down, these are our friends and allies, and come up with a plan in the Americas to get to the root cause of this. And while we have these issues, we have to deal with them. And can I just say, $700 a night, that's what these private contractors are getting to put up a child who's unaccompanied. That's the equivalent to a Four Seasons hotel, and they don't even have a toothbrush. These thieves, they're stealing American taxpayer dollars and destroying families. Look, you can see that I'm very emotional, but having said that I'm emotional, this is not rocket science. We can handle this. If Trump can find all that money for the farmers, and fine, he's giving them billions of dollars because of his ridiculous tariff issues, he can certainly find the money, even without Congress, for this humanitarian emergency. He could access funding, for lots of other things, but somehow this just slipped his mind.
Lost in all this was setting the record straight. And I want to give you a chance to do it. The president, before he left for the G20, said that your party, the Democrats, were the open border party. Your party and previous President Obama, they had even a worse situation as it related to separating families. And he, President Trump, was about uniting families. He said it was everyone's fault but his own. Can you please fact check that a little bit? Because you were there when this, A, happened under the prior administration, the policy, and B, you've seen what's happened now.
Well, this president lies 19 lies a day. They're in the more than 12,000 lies, I think, at this point, documented. So he's a liar. The fact is, Barack Obama had a policy, and so did George W. Bush before him, which was when we deport people, we deport the people who have committed violent crimes. That's who, we were focused on. And everyone supported that. Now, were there some mistakes made on that? Sure. And the only time children were separated were because they knew that the parent was violent or there was a problem. Now, what Trump has decided to do is make it so horrifying for people, so inhumane for people, that he thinks that's going to keep them home. But I got to tell you something. People know in their heart of hearts that America, we're the land of the free, the home of the brave. Give me your tired, your poor, all the things we've stood for all these years, and they still will leave the violence. And all I could say is I am so humiliated and incensed that we have a president who says there's both sides of every issue on racism and white nationalism, who says horrible things about immigrants. And if every single person in America really looked inside their heart, they would see this president pretty much has insulted them, be they a woman or an immigrant, coming from an immigrant family, and all the other things that he attacks.
Couple political questions while I have you. Last night on the debate stage, the subject of Medicare for all was brought up, and all the hands shot up for the presidential hopefuls. You were there. You know how hard it was to pass Obamacare. Are you concerned, especially when people do the math on Medicare for all, that you're taking a popular policy today in 2019, Obamacare and health care reform, that you were there when you passed it? Shouldn't it be mended, maybe fixed, but not thrown out altogether? Politically, could that be a loser for Democrats next year?
Well, I can tell you the way I feel about it. I believe that Obamacare set the stage for universal coverage. But there was one thing that fell short by about a vote or two, and that was the public option. So I do believe we should add a Medicare for all who want it option. Because I don't like the idea of telling someone, I don't know what your health care is. I've got some that's not Medicare. I think it's really good. It's a retirement health care plan. I really like it. And there's no reason for me to want to change. But if I didn't like it, if it suddenly changed, I would love to be able to have a chance at Medicare. So that's what I think we need to do. So basically, I come down on the side of a couple of the candidates who said public option, Medicare for all who want it. And that'll, it's important to resolve it. But I do agree with you that throwing things out that already work is a huge mistake. We should allow that to work and add this public option so that everybody has a chance to get insurance. That's affordable.
Senator, your old friend, Speaker Pelosi, she's navigating a tightrope of sorts. You've got a growing number, albeit a minority at this point, of Democrats on the Hill calling for impeachment. But the number is growing, and now we know that Mueller will be testifying July 17th. Do you think there's an inevitability that the groundswell is going to push her from within the party ranks, that she's got to bring it up for a vote? Where do you see this going? And can she continue to say, listen, if we're not going to get the votes in the Senate, why go through the exercise?
Well, that's, you're asking a very important question. And let me just say this. I believe Nancy Pelosi is one of the best strategists around. And I believe she understands the Constitution. And I believe she believes that there are impeachable offenses. The question is, if you go through this process, what happens to the rest of the agenda? And even if you just look at the debate that occurred the first night, there was very little talk about impeachment. It's all about issues that deal with the American people. So if you go down the impeachment road, all the other committees are taken out of it, okay? Everything focuses on judiciary, and frankly, it takes us in that direction. Now, we may have to go in that direction just because you don't want to have a precedent that you have a president like this who gets away with it. But I think Nancy's putting one foot in front of the other. But I thought it really was interesting that most of the focus in that first presidential debate was on issues that impact the American people. And this man is going to, this Trump, he has definitely, in my view, having read the Mueller report, and by the way, seen it reenacted, which I think is really interesting to do, 10, 11, times where he committed obstruction, certainly firing Comey to take the pressure off the investigation, trying to get rid of Sessions, trying to get rid of Mueller, trying to get rid of Rosenstein, trying to, even after he said to Sessions, okay, stay there, then trying to get him to unrecuse himself. It goes on and on and on. So he has to have justice. But let's see where this all goes.
Last thing from me, Senator. I interviewed not long ago your old colleague, George Mitchell, and he believes that the guardrails of democracy are there to even protect the system from somebody like Donald Trump. But I mean, just take the last 24 hours. He's attacking the Fed chair and talking openly about firing Powell. He's now setting up meetings. He's going to meet again with Putin, and who knows what goes on there as he talks down the entire continent of Europe and all our allies. And I could keep going, but this is every day. Do you think that those guardrails of democracy, the checks and balances that supposedly we've always counted on, are you as confident as your old colleague that no matter what they'll rein in Trump? Or are you concerned if he got another 4 years come 2020, where we could be as a country?
Oh, I'm very concerned if he got another 4 years, because you're looking at, the checks and balances that my colleague, who was my majority leader, brilliant man, George Mitchell, points out. One of the checks is the courts, and if he does blatantly partisan appointments, I do very much worry about that. And, if the Senate stays in Republican hands, which I hope it will not, and I think we're going to take it over, we're in trouble. But this is the thing. I would go back to Benjamin Franklin, who said after the Constitution was written, when he was asked, have you given us a republic or have you given us, a monarchy? And his answer was a republic. But then he said, if you can keep it. And I think those words are really important. And let me just close this question with this response. We have in our hands the vote. The vote is the ultimate check on a tyrannical figure like Donald Trump. And if people can understand that and not expect perfection, because we don't know who's going to get this nomination. It may be your first choice, your second choice, your last choice, or your no choice. The bottom line, we have to unify, and we have to win that election. So at the end of the day, that's our real true power, and that's our guardrails, because I do worry about the other usual guardrails, just given this president who is pushing those guardrails out of the way every chance he gets.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Senator. I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Of course. Bye.
When we come back, we will discuss the debates, what happened last night, the winners, losers, and also a preview about what to expect tonight. Stay with us.